Okay, hi. In this short video we're going to look at an example of an academic paragraph. Looking at the first sentence, this looks like a fairly simple sentence. In fact, it is a simple sentence in terms of its structure. Gold, a precious metal, is prized for two important characteristics. That seems like a fairly straightforward thing to say, nothing exceptional, but in fact this sentence is very important and it has two functions for the reader. We call this sentence a topic sentence, and the first function of the sentence, of course, is to tell us what is the topic of the paragraph. Here, nice and straightforward, the topic is gold. It's about gold. Now, obviously there's many different things we could say about gold. We could talk about the price, we could talk about why it's a stable investment, we could talk about the fact that my granny's got some, all sorts of things. So the reader needs to know in what way are we going to limit our discussion in this paragraph. What is the reader actually going to find out about gold? And so we call this part of the sentence the controlling idea. The controlling idea. The controlling idea limits the scope of the discussion. How much of all the things we could say about gold are we going to talk about, or in what areas? So we're just going to talk about two important characteristics. In sentence 2, the first thing that you see is this transition signal, first of all. And this also has a useful function. It tells the reader that we're moving straight from the topic sentence into the first important characteristic. If it wasn't there, the transition signal, the reader might think we were going to provide some more introductory information or some background information or do something else. But by putting it there, we tell the reader we're moving directly to the first characteristic. And so we get this sentence: gold has a lustrous beauty that is resistant to corrosion. Now there's two ideas in here about gold. One is that it's beautiful and the other is that it's resistant to corrosion. How can you know which is the main point of that idea? Well, if you go back to what you learned about sentence structure, you should see that this is a complex sentence with a dependent relative clause, a defining relative clause. And if you remember what you learned about sentence structure, we know that the relative clause is the minor idea. So that knowledge of grammar and sentence structure can help us to figure out the meaning. The most important point here is that gold is beautiful. Moving on to sentence 3, again we see that there's this transition signal here. What the writer needs to do now, after stating the first important characteristic, is to back that up with some supporting detail. And the transition signal here, therefore, tells us what kind of supporting detail that is. Is it an example? Is it a cause? Is it an effect, or what? Therefore tells us that the supporting detail coming in sentence 3 is a consequence of this fact that we've just talked about. And the consequence is this: because it's beautiful, it's suitable for jewelry, coins, and ornamental purposes. Okay. The next sentence is also a supporting detail, and it's supporting number 2. It's not supporting number 3. It's another consequence. Gold never needs to be polished and will remain beautiful forever. That gives you a supporting detail for this. Okay? Interesting to just note here that what kind of supporting detail is for. For is also a consequence of number 2, but the writer doesn't put in the word therefore again, because if they did, that would actually confuse the reader. That would change the logic of the sentence connections. Because if we said therefore in number 3, it's suitable for jewelry, coins, and ornamental purposes. If we then said therefore gold never needs to be polished here, that would look as if we were saying that number 4 is a consequence of number 3. So there's a good reason for there not being a transition there, as well as there being a good reason for why there is one at number 3. Okay, sentence number 5 got a transition signal, now telling the reader what kind of supporting detail, what is the logical connection between this new sentence and the previous ones. For example, so we know it's an example. A Macedonian coin remains as untarnished today untarnished means unspoiled or still as beautiful as the day it was minted. Minted means made 23 centuries ago. So we get the idea here that this example is an example of the fact that it's beautiful and still resistant to corrosion even after, what, 2,300 years. Okay, in number 6, the most important thing to notice here, again, is how does the sentence start? Another important characteristic. Notice that this links the vocabulary from the topic sentence to the beginning of this sentence, telling the reader that we've now done with the first idea. We're now on to the second idea. Another important characteristic of gold is its usefulness to industry and science. So this is the second important characteristic. And as before, we need to support that claim with some details. But the kind of details and the logical connection here is different from in the first half of the paragraph. For many years, gold has been used in hundreds of industrial applications. The next sentence in 8 brings that historical idea up to date. The most recent use of gold is in astronaut suits. So we're now supporting not actually sentence 6 directly, but sentence 7. So sentence was, if you like, a historical claim, and number 8 is extending that right up to the present day. And number 9 is now drilling down into this example. Number 8 is an example. Number 9 is now drilling down into the details of that example, getting nice and specific. So one thing to note is going all the way up from 3 down to 3, 4, 5, and 7, 8, 9 is just thinking about the different ways that the writer has supported the main ideas. A couple of consequences in 3 and 4, an example in 5, and then for the second idea in number 7, we've got some historical context, an example from recent times, and then some specific details about that example. So what's important here is not those particular logical connections, but the fact that the writer has used a variety. The writer hasn't just gone sentence 3, example, sentence 4, example, sentence 5, example, new idea, 6, 7, example, 8, example, 9, example. That would be both a bit boring for the reader and not very convincing just to give the same kind of support. The important thing is that you think about different ways in which you can convince your reader of your claim. Talking about consequences, talking about causes, talking about examples, giving explanations, giving definitions. There's lots of different logical functions that we can talk about. Okay, and then just to finish off the final sentence, in conclusion, again we have this transition. Why is that important? It signals to the reader that we're going to wrap up the paragraph. Obviously this is just a single paragraph, standalone. If you're writing essays or projects or reports, you might not need a concluding sentence at the end of your paragraph, maybe just at the end of a section, or of course you probably have a concluding paragraph at the end of a long essay. But a standalone paragraph like this, you need one, and whenever you use these concluding sentences, the key thing is not to add any new information. If you look at what this conclusion says, it simply restates the two main ideas, beauty and usefulness, utility. It's important that you don't add anything new in a conclusion. It's also important that you don't repeat what was said in the paragraph, but what's done here is actually what we call a restatement, not a repetition. And you could, in theory, swap these two sentences around. So it's possible that you could begin with, gold, a precious metal, is treasured not only for its beauty but also its utility, and then go into your details and end, in conclusion, gold is prized for these two important characteristics. In other words, you should be able to swap places with these two sentences if you've made a good restatement, but they should not just be the same sentence repeated. We'll try to explore a little bit more about paragraph structure and other concepts like unity and coherence in the next video. I hope this has been helpful. Thanks.